On a warm September evening in 2019, a commuter flight lifted off from Las Vegas, bound for a small airfield in southern Utah. 39 minutes later, the aircraft slipped off radar over a maze of red rock canyons, a place where wind and shadow can hide anything. What followed became one of the most haunting unsolved incidents in American aviation. Canyon Air Flight 702 was a routine hop, a quick way for hikers, ranchers, and weekend gamblers to move between Utah and Nevada. At 5:12 p.m., passengers boarded an aging Dash 8 turboprop on the ramp at McCarran Airport. Its paint was sun-faded, but maintenance logs were clean. Camera pans across boarding steps. Luggage handlers tossed duffels into the hold. Captain Elena Torres, 44, was a veteran of regional flying, calm, exacting, known for her dry humor. Beside her sat First Officer Greg Mallory, younger, eager, still learning to temper adrenaline with caution. Cockpit recreation, voice actors. Torres. Before start checklist complete. Mallory. Fuel balanced. ATIS is still showing clear skies. Wind southwest. Torres. Copy. Let's get out before those thermals kick up. Instrument panel glows as propellers spool. Inside the cabin, 21 passengers settled into narrow seats. A father and teenage son with fishing rods, a group of photographers chasing desert light, and a young couple whispering about wedding plans. Cut to interview style, scripted. Riley Shaw, local journalist. 702 was the kind of flight locals took all the time. Nobody expected anything beyond a bumpy ride across the plateau. At 5:28 p.m., the Dash 8 taxied past glimmering lights of the Strip. The sun was dropping fast, the air cooling. A controller cleared them for departure. Canyon Air 702, runway 25 right, cleared for takeoff. Cockpit. Torres. Power set, airspeed alive. Mallory. Rotate. Wheels leave the asphalt. Las Vegas skyline slides beneath. For the first 20 minutes, everything looked ordinary. The aircraft climbed smoothly to 12,000 feet, tracking northeast along the Virgin River corridor. Passengers gazed out at an endless quilt of copper and gold, unaware that their journey would soon enter legend. At 5:52 p.m., Flight 702 crossed the Utah line, cruising above the Virgin River Gorge. The sun had slipped behind the mountains, casting long indigo shadows across the desert floor. Wide shot. Mesas darkening while thin clouds glow pink on their edges. Air traffic control at Cedar City kept a casual watch. The route was quiet, weather charts clean. Only a few summer updrafts lingered along the canyon rims. Inside the cockpit recreation. Mallory. Getting a light chop. Torres. Yeah, but nothing serious. Let's ride it out. A soft chime sounds. A flight attendant peers in. Flight attendant. Seatbelt sign, Captain. Torres. Go ahead and switch it on. Should be smooth again after the plateau. The aircraft leveled at 12,000 feet. Passengers fastened belts as the turboprop droned over a sea of stone. Camera glides past windows, dark rivers snaking through orange cliffs. At 5:57 p.m., radar plots show 702 beginning a gentle right turn to avoid a bank of high cirrus. Nothing unusual, but 2 minutes later, controllers heard something strange. Radio dramatization, slightly distorted. Torres. Cedar Canyon 702. We're picking up. Static, muffled thump. Torres again. Faint. Repeat. Moderate. Instruments. Then silence. The call was clipped, as if the signal had been swallowed mid-sentence. Controllers requested a repeat. No answer. Radar animation. Graphics on screen. A green dot drifts northeast, hesitates, then fades. At 6:01, the transponder blinked once and disappeared from the scope. Cut to interview. Scripted. Ben Hardy, air traffic specialist. I thought maybe they'd descended behind a ridge. That happens. But we still had their ADS-B feed. When that stopped too, my stomach dropped. On board, we can only imagine what the crew saw. Twilight settling over a wilderness of cliffs, the horizon thinning to black. Maybe a warning light flashed or a sudden downdraft shoved the nose earthward. Whatever it was, it happened fast. Sound design, rising wind, engine surge fading into quiet. Searchers would later pinpoint the last ping from 702's satellite tracker. a patch of desert straddling the Utah-Arizona line, threaded with canyons so deep the evening sun never touches their floors. Camera descends into shadowy ravines, silence except for a faint echo of propellers. Within minutes, the plane and everyone aboard had slipped beneath that vast red horizon, leaving only an unfinished sentence hanging in static. By 6:10 p.m., controllers declared a communications emergency. Within an hour, the Air Force Rescue Coordination Center had been notified, and a nighttime operation swung into motion. Visual, flashing radios, maps spread over desks, controllers leaning close. Canyon country complicates even the best search plans. Deep gorges break radar lines. Cliffs swallow radio waves. As dusk gave way to a velvet desert night, helicopters lifted from Cedar City and St. George, their spotlights sweeping the Badlands. Interview, scripted. Lieutenant Rosa Martinez, Utah Civil Air Patrol. It was blacker than a cave down there. No moon, just stars. The terrain was jagged, and there are hundreds of box canyons with no way in except on foot. Montage, rescue crews loading gear, a Coast Guard C-130 circling, infrared scopes scanning. Searchers used the last satellite ping as their anchor, plotting a rough box across 60 square miles of rock and sand, but winds had kicked up, scattering scent and dust, erasing any trace. Voiceover over footage of worried families at an airport lounge. Relatives gathered in Las Vegas, staring at flight boards that would never update. News outlets aired live shots of empty desert horizons. Cut to Torres's brother speaking quietly to reporters. Actor portrayal, Daniel Torres, brother of the captain. She loved that route. She said flying over the canyons at sunset was like gliding over another planet. We just want her home. Daylight brought a mosaic of orange and cream cliffs, towering spires and sinuous riverbeds. Fixed-wing planes traced grid patterns above, while ground teams picked their way along ledges. Helicopter interior, voice actors over rotor hum. Pilot, no visual, just sagebrush and stone. Observer, wait, maybe a reflection near the gulch. They bank hard, the glint vanishes. Hour after hour, nothing but here. Shimmer. Yet searchers press deeper, rappelling into slot canyons, combing dry creek beds, hauling ropes through narrow chasms. Camera shows tiny figures against immense cliffs dwarfed by sunlit walls. Interview, Dr. Kim Lee, geospatial analyst. You realize how empty it is out there. A plane can hide for years if it falls into the right crease of stone. By the third evening, hope wavered. But then, just before sunset, an Arizona Department of Public Safety chopper crew spotted something pale wedged between shadows of a remote gorge. Close up, rotor wash whipping dust. A crewman leans out, pointing. It looked like metal. Hold the moment, cutting to black. At dawn on the fourth day, a team of rangers, state troopers, and NTSB specialists set out toward the coordinates relayed by the helicopter crew. Their destination, a narrow gulch cut deep into Navajo sandstone, a place so hidden even seasoned hikers had never marked it on maps. Wide shot, a convoy of dusty SUVs snaking along a desert track. Beyond, crimson cliffs rise like frozen waves. Narrator. The last mile had no road at all. Investigators hauled ropes and climbing gear, lowering themselves into a labyrinth of rock. Close up on the lead rescuer. Actor portrayal, Ranger Collins. Watch your footing, loose gravel. They round a bend. Sunlight strikes something dull but unmistakable. Twisted silver metal against ochre stone. Narrator. There, half buried in sand, lay the forward fuselage of Flight 702. Its nose was crushed, windows shattered, paint scorched by friction. No smoke, no fire, only stillness. Camera pans slowly along the wreck, a propeller blade bent backwards, seats exposed to open air. Interview, scripted. Lieutenant Rosa Martinez, Utah Civil Air Patrol. It was eerie. You expect chaos at a crash site, debris everywhere. But this, it looked as if the plane had been placed there.
Narrator. The main cabin was largely intact, though the tail section was missing, sheared away somewhere up canyon. Inside view. Investigators duck through the torn doorway. Sunlight filters across abandoned belongings. A backpack, a camera, a child's stuffed bear, resting in dust. Narrator. Strangely, there were no bodies in the immediate wreckage. The seats were empty, belts unbuckled, as though the passengers had stepped out moments before. Interview. Fictional NTSB voice. Avery Holt, NTSB investigator.
We were expecting to find victims still strapped in. Instead, nothing. Just silence and the occasional coyote call. Drone shot climbs above the
Gulch, showing jagged rock walls sealing the site from view. Narrator. Farther down the ravine, searchers located the tailplane, crumpled but identifiable. Scattered along the route were life vests, a logbook, fragments of wing, evidence that 702 struck ridges before sliding into its final cradle. Narrator, slightly hushed. The flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder were recovered, lodged under a slab of stone. Their casings were scuffed but intact, a fragile thread between mystery and understanding. Camera focuses on investigators lifting orange recorders with gloved hands. As dusk painted the sandstone in violet tones, teams secured the site, tagging debris, covering remains with tarps. For the first time since takeoff, there was proof of where Flight 702 had come to rest, but not of why. With the wreckage secured, investigators turned to the recorders, the one chance to decode the silence between Flight 702's last words and its fate in the Gulch. Visual technicians unloading bright orange boxes at an NTSB lab, hands gently brushing away dust. Narrator. The cockpit voice recorder revealed an uneventful climb, punctuated by small talk between Captain Torres and First Officer Mallory. Then, at 5:58 p.m., came a faint rattle like loose sheet metal, followed by a sudden increase in background wind. Audio dramatization, slightly muffled. Mallory. Getting some buffet on the controls. Torres. Trim feels heavy. Beep. Torres. Okay, that's odd. We just lost the number 2 autopilot. Crackle. Thump. Torres. Firm.
My controls. Wind roars. Static rises. Recording ends. Narrator. The data recorder added detail. Abrupt pitch oscillations. A steep descent. Then a leveling moment before impact. But the readout stopped 14 seconds before ground contact. A cable severed in the final breakup. Graphic overlay. Jagged line of altitude trace plunging toward 0. Interview. Scripted. Avery Holt. NTSB investigator. We saw signs of structural stress. Maybe turbulence amplified by canyon winds. But there were also anomalies. A hydraulic pressure drop, unexplained yaw, and that strange rattle before the loss of control. Narrator. Weather experts examined archived satellite images. A narrow band of high-altitude wind had swept the plateau that evening. A jet of unstable air spilling off a thunderhead hundreds of miles away. Meteorologist, actor. If they crossed a microburst at low altitude, it could flip a light turboprop, but microbursts leave marks, downed brush, sand scars,
and none were found. Narrator. Mechanical failure was also considered. The Dash 8's tail component showed wear, but nothing decisive. Sabotage.
He was no residue of explosives, no threats received, no suspicious passengers. Close up. Investigators turning over a scorched panel, checking rivets. Narrator. Attention returned to the site itself. Some debris suggested the plane had glided, engines idling, for several hundred yards before coming to rest, as though Torres managed a desperate partial landing. Interview. Fictional. Dr. Evan Brooke, Human Factors Specialist. What haunts me is how controlled parts of it look. They fought to the end. The mystery is what stole their margin. Narrator. Families found little comfort in technical language. For them, the unanswered question remained. Why had a routine hop through clear skies ended in a hidden gorge? Montage. Photographs of passengers, candles flickering at a memorial, desert wind sighing through sage. Narrator, soft. Even with recorders and wreckage, the desert kept secrets. The last 14 seconds, and the reason Flight 702 fell silent, may never fully emerge from the red rock.
In the months after the discovery of Flight 702, investigators released an interim report. Their conclusion: a rapid loss of control triggered by violent desert turbulence compounded by a subtle fault in the tail's hydraulic system. Yet the report left gaps large enough for speculation to take root. Footage, stacks of documents, engineers testing control surfaces in a wind tunnel. Narrator: airlines flying the same route adopted new guidance. Avoid low-level shortcuts through canyons during unstable weather, even when skies seem clear. Pilots were reminded that evening air currents over plateau country can turn treacherous with little warning. Interview, fictional. Captain Dana Walsh, Regional Safety Officer. Torres and Mallory did everything they could. They were fighting a problem most of us hadn't trained for. A sudden mix of turbulence and system failure at an altitude too low for error. Cut to a stone memorial near a desert overlook. Names of 23 passengers and crew etched into bronze. Narrator: for the families, the canyon is now a place of quiet remembrance. Hikers pass a small plaque fixed to sandstone, often leaving river stones or wildflowers. From above, the gulch is still invisible, a scar hidden among 1,000 others. Visual. Sunset washes the cliffs in copper and rose. A hawk drifts on thermals. Narrator, soft. Flight 702's story is one of skill meeting circumstance, of human resilience against nature's sudden violence. Even in mystery, there is testimony to courage. Aerial shot. The camera rises over sweeping mesas, revealing an endless desert horizon as dusk deepens. Narrator, closing line. High over red rock country, silence returned, leaving only the wind, the stone, and the memory of a crew and passengers who vanished into legend.